A former international studies student was lucky enough to get a job as soon as he left Miami, and he worked for 4 or 5 years in Africa working on development projects. Eventually, he came back to the United States because he needed to get a graduate degree in order to continue to advance in his field. I don't remember the name of the degree that he got. It was some complicated title like Developing Solutions in Global Contexts or something. It sounded more like a class name than the title of a degree. But one interesting thing that he shared with me was that he believed the single most important thing he learned in 2 years of graduate school was how to give presentations. He said that everything that he learned about budgeting and management and assessment, he'd already covered on the ground in the field in Africa. So grad school was just giving him a kind of map of the forest for trees he already knew. However, he said every semester he had to give between 3 and 5 public presentations as part of the coursework. And he said that everything he thought he knew from high school and college about giving presentations turned out to be wrong. But by the time he finished his graduate program, he could confidently put a pitch or a program assessment together and deliver it rapidly and effectively. And that turned out to be absolutely crucial to his career. When I asked him what the most significant thing he learned was, he said that there were two crucial lessons about making good presentations. The first was that you are the presentation, not your slides or any other technology. And the second was that the slides are important as illustrations and supporting material, but if you can't give a dynamic and persuasive presentation without them, then you shouldn't be giving a presentation at all. Today I want to very quickly run through a number of key points that support that first lesson, the lesson that you are the presentation. In a week or so we'll go through another discussion of the second point and ask how you integrate high-quality data shows into your presentation. The starting place for any presentation is a consideration of the audience. Who are you presenting to? What do they know? What do you want them to learn from you? What kind of professional standards will they expect? What modes of speaking will seem the most persuasive to them, and which modes of presentation might seem more gimmicky and be less persuasive? In this class, you will be performing for 2 audiences. One is the imagined audience of your client, and the other is the audience of your peers and ITS faculty. You want to approach your presentation with professionalism and keep it addressed to your client, while at the same time including enough context that an intelligent audience, without the expertise that your client would have, would still be able to follow it. Since clients often bring guests to these kinds of meetings, this isn't as large a gap as you might think. Your 20-minute presentation is not a summary of your policy analysis. Not everything from your policy analysis needs to be in your presentation. In fact, most of it will not go into your presentation, although you need to know everything in your policy analysis so that you can answer questions that are raised at the end of your presentation. The main points that you hit in your presentation are not even going to be structured in the same way that they are in your policy analysis. A presentation is a completely different genre than a policy analysis. It is essentially not a report or an analysis, but a pitch, a persuasive focus on a particular problem and its solution, with just enough information to make the problem compelling and the proposed solution persuasive. This is a very interesting diagram that a business consultant created as a modification of Joseph Campbell's famous analysis of the structure of the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell essentially argued that the vast majority of hero stories in mythology and folklore had essentially the same structure, which he divided into 17 parts, although he acknowledged that not all hero stories have all 17 parts. But at any rate, in this fascinating diagram, a business consultant laid out all the components for a good business talk built around the structure of the hero's journey. Essentially saying that the best way to do a business talk is to take your audience on the hero's journey with you. The point of bringing this up is to remind you that when you give a presentation, you are essentially telling a story. In your case, it is a story about a problem that needs to be solved, obstacles that need to be overcome, and an invitation to the audience to be part of that solution that could lead to a successful outcome for your client and perhaps other stakeholders as well. The policy analysis is the data, the information from which you draw what you need to tell this story in this presentation. A good presentation is therefore always well constructed. Carefully outline your talk with this storytelling approach in mind. You may want to try writing your presentation on file cards first or on post-it notes. Writing comments on post-it notes has become increasingly popular because you can put them up on a whiteboard or a wall and move around, and lots of people can come in and read them and shift them around. So it makes for a dynamic and dialogical team-based process of outlining. Another advantage that some designers find in post-it notes as an outlining system is that post-it notes are too small to put a lot of information on, which is useful because when you go to prepare the slides that will support your talk, you don't want to put too much information on any given slide. The idea is if it won't fit on a post-it note, it doesn't need to be on a slide. At least that's the claim made by designers who use this kind of an outlining system. In the handout I asked you to download, I have another approach to outlining a talk. These worksheets come from a book called The Exceptional Presenter by Timothy Kergel, and I use them primarily because I happened to meet him at Notre Dame by accident in 2007, the year the book came out, and he gave me a copy of the book, and I used it for several years to help coach students in this area. Kergel recommends a two-part approach to outlining. First, there's a general presentation prep sheet, which clarifies who the audience is, your objectives and goals, and other key points that need to be in the presentation. The second worksheet generates an outline that actually structures the presentation that you are going to make. Transitions are critical in giving a presentation. You must connect what you just said to what is coming next when you move from point to point. Transitions between topics and slides are crucial opportunities to get people to re-engage your talk. But more importantly, this is where the real story takes place. Neither the slide that shows the map nor the slide that comes after it with the economic data is important by itself. It is your ability to incorporate them into the overarching story you are telling about the problem that needs to be overcome that's the crucial part of the presentation. Successful presenters choreograph and practice their delivery of the story. Presenters try to learn to look straight at the audience and not at the slides. In fact, you should never look at the slides unless you are specifically going to point to one. You want to come across as poised and passionate and knowledgeable. In the past, when we gave presentations to students in Introduction to International Studies classes, frequently the students in my class would go and check out the classroom in advance so they could see how to best use the space in delivering their presentations. Your voice and your body language matter. You want to wear clothing that is neutral in color. There's no plaids or stripes. You want to be erect but animated. You want to avoid nervous hands up at your chest, or clasped in front of you, or tucked into your pockets, or clasped behind you. Keep your hands by your side, except when you're deliberately using them to gesture, which should be often. And you want your gestures to be defined, not nebulous. You want your facial expression to be inviting and your voice to be engaging and energetic and dynamic. The only way to learn all those skillful presentation skills is to get feedback. Feedback that allows you to improve from one iteration to another. You can perform in front of a mirror and give yourself feedback that way, and with cell phones and other quick and easy digital video capture devices, you can get feedback by watching yourself perform that way. But the best and most objective feedback remains the feedback that you get from other people. Again, I offer two forms from Mr. Kergel's book. The first is a presentation assessment form, which asks details about your voice, your posture, and other aspects of your delivery. The second is a chart for marking improvement on your delivery from one iteration to another along these dimensions of posture, gesture, contact, voice volume, inflection, and tendency to drift off target and make noises like which Kergel calls filler. Finally, I need to emphasize that professional presentations are not created by a team of all 4 or 5 members of the task force crowding up at the front of the room and each delivering a 5-minute portion of it in their own distinct vocal and physical style. I have to emphasize this because I find that a lot of students have been misled about this by their high school teachers, and by the time they get to the capstone, it still hasn't been beaten out of them by my colleagues here at the university. The fact is that your presentation is a product of the entire task force, which has to convert the policy analysis into that 20-minute story. But the presentation itself is performed by 1 or 2 task members who are particularly well suited to making the pitch in front of an audience. Another member of the team should be carefully running the technology to make sure that the right slides are up as the presenters talk, and the whole team should probably come up on stage for questions and answers. As with many other parts of the project, there should be a division of labor based on what skills different members of the group have. I want to close by sharing something that a number of students have shared with me over the last 4 or 5 years about changes in the way that people get into careers and the importance of good presentation skills in that process. In the old days, students would graduate and they would send out their CVs, and on the basis of those CVs, they'd go in and they would do an interview. And if it was a good interview, then they might be called back for a second interview. And the second interview was usually to pick a final candidate out of the 3 that had been narrowed down from the bigger pool. That's no longer the way it works in many of the problem solution fields that a lot of international studies students go into. Instead, after they review your CV and they bring you in for that first interview, at the end of that first interview, they may pose you a problem. And instead of coming back for a second, more detailed interview, they bring you back to pitch your solution to the problem, which means that your presentation skills matter already at the time you're applying for the job, not just when you are working for them and giving pitches to clients. So I hope that all of you will understand that creating these kinds of presentations is part of your learning to be professionals. And that is why we insist on it. You'll be answering questions about this presentation, my presentation. So please bring those to class with you and give me a chance to answer them. And have a productive week.